So we just do by steps, how we did it in our assignments. All right, so you got step 1. Okay, step 1. Change f of x to y. Okay, so that's step 1. All right, so I'm going to change it. So I got y equals square root of x minus 5 plus 2. Okay, step 2 is to switch x and y. Switch x and y. Now my new equation is going to say x equals square root of y minus 5 plus 2. Okay, so now I just got to get my y by itself. All right, we just use our rules that we have in the other ones. Okay, so we want to, step 3, get radical by itself. So that means I got to move my 2. Okay, so I got to move my 2. So I have x equals square root of y minus 5 plus 2. I got to move my 2. So it's subtract 2 from one side, subtract 2 from the other side. So now I'm left with x minus 2 equals square root of y minus 5. Okay, so radical by itself. Step 4, square both sides. Okay, step 4 is to square both sides. So I'm going to take this here, so I'm going to square one side, I'm going to square the second side. Okay, so I'm left with x minus 2 squared equals y minus 5. Last step. Get y by itself. Okay, so now we just have to add 5 to both sides. Okay, so I got to add 5 to both sides, so I'm left with x minus 2 squared plus 5 equals y. Okay, and that would be my inverse. If you really want to, you can flip them around. That's really up to you. Okay, that would be my inverse. Alright, I guess there's one more step. So last step, step 6, change y to f of negative 1 of x. Okay, so you can show that's the inverse. So I'm going to write f negative 1 of x equals x minus 2 squared plus 5. Okay, that's the inverse. Marcos, you good? Aline, you good? Yes? Finished it? Okay, number 2. You got f of x equals square root of x plus 1 minus 3. Okay, so we can do these steps again. I'm not going to write out all the steps again. I'm just going to do the steps, all right? So we look up here, first step, okay, it says change f of x to y. I'm just going to change it to y. Oh, real quick, before we do that, okay, if I ask you for the domain, okay, what's the domain of f of x and the range of f of x, okay, you have to plug it into a calculator, all right? So I take the, I'm looking up here, okay, so x plus 1 minus 3. All right, so if I take it, if I look here, okay, remember your domain is from left to right. Okay, so if you're going right, it's going to keep going. Look, it just keeps going and going and going and going and going. Okay, don't stop. That line up there. All right. Okay, if I look at my left, it stops at -1. Okay, it stops at -1. All right, so remember, domain's from left to right. Okay, so I'm going to write my domain. Okay, so from left to right. My domain from left to right. Okay, so going left, we know it goes to -1. So it'll be -1 less than or equal to, remember your domain is x, less than or equal to, and it goes to the right and it doesn't stop. So it's infinity. Okay. For range, right? I know this line's not going straight up or like diagonal, but it is increasing the whole time and it's not going to stop. Okay, so your range, remember, is from top or bottom to top. Right? And you got to see what it starts at. So it starts here at -3, so it'll be -3 less than or equal to y less than or equal to infinity, because it's just going to keep going. And I don't think you write equal to, just write less than. Okay, it's not going to be equal to infinity. It's just going to keep going up. All right, so that's for f of x. Okay, we got to do the same thing whenever we find the inverse right now. Okay, so once you find the inverse, we'll plug it in again once we find the inverse. So f of x, that's the domain range for f of x. Okay, and once we find the inverse, we'll do the same thing. All right, that's if they ask you on the quiz, what's the domain and range of this function. All right, but our first step, okay, now we're going back to inverses. Our first step is change f of x to y. So y equals square root of x plus 1 minus 3. That's the first step. I'm just following what we did in the last problem. Okay. Step 2. All right, it says switch x and y. Okay, so I got to switch them. So I got x equals square root of y plus 1 minus 3. Okay, that was step 2. Now I'm on step 3. Get the radical by itself. Well, it's not by itself, so I got to add 3 and add 3 to the other side. Okay, that gives me x plus 3 equals square root of y plus 1. That was step 3. Okay, step 4, square both sides. So I'm going to square this side, I'm going to square this side. So I'm left with square x plus 3 squared equals y plus 1. Okay. Last step, get y by itself, so I got to subtract 1. Subtract 1, subtract 1. Okay, you're left with x plus 3 squared minus 1 equals y, because that cancels out. Then your last step, change y to f of negative 1 of x. So you have f negative 1 of x equals x plus 3 squared minus 1. That's the answer that you get. Okay? And now, if I wanted to find the domain and range of it, inverse of x, okay, domain, range. Okay, remember you're looking from left to right for the domain. Looking from bottom to top for range. Okay, so I just gotta graph it again. Okay, but now I'm gonna graph the inverse. Okay, so I get x plus 3 squared minus 1. Okay, x plus 3 squared minus 1, and you see, is the inverse of the square root. Okay, the inverse of the square root. Let me graph this original one real quick. I'll grab both of them so you can see both of them together. Square root of x plus 1 Okay, so for your domain, look from left to right. Right is going up both sides. Okay, so that would just be negative infinity less than x less than infinity. Right, because it's increasing both sides the whole time. Here on the bottom, okay, it goes to negative 1. So you have negative 1 less than or equal to y. Less than or equal to, and it's always increasing, so be infinity. And that would be your domain and range for the inverse.